Hey guys, I'm Phoenix Gray, and this is LitRPG Happy Hour, where I sample LitRPG and alcoholic beverages. Feel free to drink along if you dare. Today I'll be reading a sample of Murderworld by Alan White, and I'll be playing a game called You've Been Notified along with it, where I will take a drink every time there's a notification. If you want to follow along, pause this video and download a copy of the book sample at the link, or you can just drink whenever I do. As disclaimer, I do not read every book that I drink to. This is all for fun and to help spread the word about LitRPG and these awesome books. Having said that, let's get started. So today I'm going to start with drinking this, it's called After All Tiramisu. I'm just going to take the whole bottle for the first one. And then I'm going to switch to drinking creme de coco, dark creme de coco. I found this at the liquor store and I thought it was cool. I probably should have, they had a bunch of different flavors. I probably should have picked up a few. But anyway, let's get started. Part 1, The Weight of the World. The instruments of battle are valuable only if one knows how to use them. Colonel Ardent de Dupique, Battle Studies, 1870. Chapter 1. Again, he died. It happened like this. The I can't speak today. The Kumoi Chao District Tampaku Bunshi shopping mall was modeled after a complex protein molecule. Its thousands of boutiques each occupied a spherical representation of an individual atom of carbon, oxygen, or hydrogen. Parts of its massive, maddening geometry, such as topsy-turvy walkways on which visitors defied gravity by walking upside down, were infamous for inducing near hallucinogenic vertigo. A wide promenade pierced the structure's heart. Neat rows of Japanese maple edged the boulevard, their translucent leaves in soft yellows, burnt oranges, and smoky maroons, backlit by street lamps that transformed them into living paper lanterns. Such simple elegance contrasted the anarchic circus that filled the plaza, dense with players flashing chiseled flesh and rowdy shocks of hair. Many hefted hyperbolic weapons or props to accessorize bodies bulked with operatic costumes, each projected an obtuse bubble of purest gamer attitude. Perry skulked through the crowd, his plain outfit conspicuous in its restraint. He wore a three-piece suit of dark blue leather over black shirt and silver tie, a matching blue leather mask encircling his eyes, and carried a gunmetal briefcase. He built the look to fit his character's jokey name, Major Lawsuit. He stepped through the door of a shop that occupied a dark atom of carbon. Its interior was a broad enclosure far larger than its modest shell could contain, physics-defying construction typical to every storefront. Katsuya no Goku was a well-known purveyor of outrageous coifs, and it specialized in vintage anime hairstyles now in vogue. Like dozens of other customers, Perry stood before one of the shop's many mirrors. There he flicked through an infinite-seeming catalog that encompassed every unruly form and garish color. He theorized that an explosive mane, perhaps in sizzling purple or smoldering red, might render him fearsome. His current style was simple, black, slicked back. Yet, as each bright, bushy mop popped onto his head, he curled his upper lip at his own clownish reflection. Within minutes, deflated, he turned to leave. Exiting the store, he jostled a woman who seemed to apport from the ether. Her bodysuit, in light-absorbing matte black, had merged with nearby shadows. "Asshole," she hissed. "Sorry," said Perry. "Outside, now." "Look, I apologize. How about we just forget about it?" Text burbled up into Perry's view. Formal challenge from Mary Knight. Accept. So that's the first notification. Let's see if this actually tastes like tiramisu. I'm highly doubting it. It smells good. Actually, it does taste really good. I would buy a whole bottle of this. It's pretty good. Matter of fact, I'm not going to throw that bottle away. I'm going to set it off to the side. He scrambled to retrieve her record. Her stats raised his blood pressure. 287,846 kills. The number was hard to comprehend, as there were top 10 players with far less impressive histories, and he'd never heard of her. If her rank wasn't tracked on the public charts, it meant she was unregistered, a choice gamers made for various reasons, most of them shady. Perry's own record was 32 wins and 5,873 losses. After 2 years of regular play, he hadn't gotten better. He'd just be another notch on Mary Knight's belt. Is this really necessary? I mean, She stared him down as one corner of her perfect mouth moved a millimeter, her bare version of a smile. I only use sharps. Go ahead, throw some rice. Makes you think you got a chance. 1 minute lead. Yeah, but she stepped nearer, growling into his ear. Run, fucker. Perry tore out the door onto the busy promenade. Outside trickled a steady rain, and a few umbrellas blossomed like flowers, greedy to drink the falling water. Nearby, a duel ended. A Mexican luchador in sapphire blue mask and tights, garnished with a yellow cape, had his throat torn out by the steel-plated claws of an anthropomorphic tiger dressed in the frills and lace of an 18th century fop. Perry accepted the challenge as he ran. His rank had fluctuated, but had more often plunged, and for his taste he was already too close to the bottom. He had only once refused a match, and the resulting point sanctions dropped him several thousand places in an instant. Perry's boss, who received a weekly game stat report for each of his employees, had almost fired him. As Perry neared the building's entrance, an armored warhorse hurtled down from one of the mall's soaring walkways to hit the floor before him, missing him by mere feet, slugging the ground with the crunch of metal and the heavy thwack of meat as it burst on impact to paint the area with gore, an instant abattoir. Perry stumbled to avoid the beast, fell on his ass as he skidded around it through a slick of fresh blood, then recovered to continue onward, his hands and pants now red and wet. From above echoed a distant rattle of semi-automatic gunfire. His heartbeat thrummed in his ears, his chest a prison for his lungs that crushed them within its suffocating fist. Sweat dribbled from his armpits down his ribs, and his old companion, nausea, crawled through his gut like a parasite. Perry wished he could just take the hit and get it over with. He knew that this scary merry night neon was going to end him, doubtless in gruesome fashion and with minimal effort. He imagined that she still waited in the store, whistling to herself as she perused pricey hairstyles that would make her even more gorgeous, the kind that calculated the movement and position of each individual hair on her scalp for heightened realism, or imparted special effects to its strands, making them glow or writhe or self-braid into ever-changing coifs. His head start counter ticked down, 30 seconds left. Outside of the looming knot of the Tampaku Bunshi, Perry ran alongside a river dotted with boats of every size. An ancient Chinese warship was anchored in the stream, with ribbed square sails that reflected flickering golden light from hundreds of oil lamps dangling from its beams, decks laden with shouting spectators rooting for participants of a bloody tag-team sword fight amidships. Perry almost tripped over two combatants grappling on the stone embankment. A wild-haired man, his toothy maniac's grin as jagged as the edge of a saw, kneeled above a regal-looking woman in a brown leather catsuit as he throttled her neck with enthusiastic vigor. Her face was hypoxic blue, yet her expression was calm as she pulled a dagger and with rapid-fire stabs punctured her attacker's chest with the speed of a sewing machine penetrating fabric. Alongside the river ran a sloped wall built with interlocking stones like the base of a Japanese castle. There seemed to be no place to hide. As he passed beneath a bridge upon which ran a high-speed rail line that connected Euthanasia with the rest of M-World, he noticed a narrow alleyway beneath the track. A tall, gloomy cut that bisected the wall and followed the rail line. He ducked into the passage, pushing his character as fast as it could go, despite the fact that the flat-out sprint depleted his waning energy. Behind him she came, somewhere in the dark, relentless. Above him a train shot past, its roar reverberating from the alley's walls like the shriek of a windstorm. Water trickled down through the tracks above in thin streams, and the alley's floor had become a shallow brook that funneled back to the nearby river. Though rapid-fire guns were disdained by better players as the tool of incompetent chobo, Perry pulled his favorite weapon from his cache, a Llama Pulverizer Mark III, an ostentatious, pricey automatic rifle the size of a deck chair that spit out 70-caliber armor-piercing slugs at 3,000 rounds per minute. Its ponderous weight, now that it was no longer stored in hammer space, slowed his movement, but he didn't care. His entire strategy was to take cover and unleash a storm of bullets, a hot wall of death between himself and his opponent. On rare occasion, the tactic had even worked. He reflected that the alley had one advantage. Nobody was there to witness his humiliation. His recurring terror was the chance that one of his pitiful deaths would end up on some trashy recap show that highlighted spectacular failures. Such public disgrace would cost him his job. He sought cover, but the walls were smooth and unbroken as far ahead as he could see, and there were no natural defenses or places from which to snipe. The passage wasn't a thoroughfare, but an architectural remnant of the railway's design, a perfect kill box. And then she was there. Mary came at Perry, a swift blur, her wiry gymnast spilled undulating like a bat in flight. She ping-ponged back and forth at impossible speeds between facing sides of the alley, ever nearer, sneering at gravity. Perry whipped the llama's nose up and fired. The gun buzzed like a lawnmower, muzzle flashed licking the darkness as it strobed the walls like lightning. Red-orange tracers pinged and whizzed into the distance, the jingle of erected brass as cheerful as the chimes of a slot machine. She eluded Perry's sloppy fire with sinuous ease, twisting between bullet trajectories as if mirroring a dance partner. Then she was next to him, and as intimate as a lover. Perry glimpsed a blink of cold light on steel, heard the wet splat of penetrated meat, followed by the zipper hiss of the small blade across his torso. The tickle of the knife as it ran through his flesh gave him chills. His liver flopped out before him, almost festive, decorated with a pale loop of intestine and enhanced by a gush of blood. The game didn't create actual pain, but real adrenaline pumped through his veins, and his own biochemistry blended with electromagnetic brain patterns of dread and anguish generated by his interface. It was a bitter cocktail that says teeth on edge, clever sensory hacks that created the illusion of being killed minus the suffering. Some players got off on dying more than murder, but Perry was no death slut. The sight of his innards paralyzed him. The clash of negative feedback cracked the game's illusion, made him realize that not only was he dying on the ground of an alley looking up at drops of rain falling straight into his eyes, but that he also reclined in a comfortable chair in his living room. Ambasnesia, noted medical literature on the subject, the disorienting sensation of being in two places at once. His display flashed the standard understood notification in the center of his vision. You have been murdered. So that is another one. Switching to the bottle that I actually have a lot of because I just bought this. Hopefully I won't pour it on my keyboard. Alright. Oh, that is not as good as that tiramisu was. Alright, you've been murdered. Below, in smaller text, a countdown began. I'm going to count this too. Respawn in 10, 9, 8. This is going to be kind of hard to take back to back, but here we go. Oh, that's going to get grosser with every one, I can tell. Mary Knight loomed over him, her face hooded by shadow, faintly haloed from behind by distant lights beyond the alley's mouth. She yanked the blade from his chest, flicked his blood from it with a snap, and spun it back into a hidden sheath. Waste of my time, she said, her voice just above a whisper. 3, 2, 1. In his living room, Perry ripped the game interface from his head just in time to lean out of his lounger, next to which he'd placed a trash can. He vomited into it as violent and repeated spasms squeezed his belly like muscular hands. Chapter 2. This is all very vividly described, which I'm really impressed with. 2 20-ish hosts. Sage 6, pink pixie-cut hair, oversized manga-style eyes, transparent floral shimmingsum? I butchered that, I'm so sorry. Pink leather bandolier lined with small knives, shuriken earrings, and punch kick, square-jawed, crimson mane exploding from his head, diamond-studded brass knuckles, red leather body armor sprouting rows of gold spikes, pointed teeth. They sit in an enchanted forest clearing at a translucent table placed atop a pile of fresh corpses. Adorable woodland creatures surround them, dozens of rabbits, a few squirrels, a deer, various bluebirds, and all nibble the flesh of the brutalized bodies with cartoonish cheer. Sage, perky and plastic. Welcome to Snuff Party, your one-stop shop for all things Murderworld. I'm Sage 6, Punch, clownishly manic, and I'm ya big bad buffoo, Punch kick. He gestures with both fist and foot as impact sound effects follow. Sage, fat news today as the M-World hacking scandal finally saw its day in court. Arrest video, 2 terrified teenagers surrounded by 50 gun-toting cops. The cops brutally take the boys down like lassoed calves and cuff them. Sage, defendants Daniel Choi and Antonio Straselli were indicted this morning in federal court as ringleaders of an international group of underground programmers who created advanced cheatware designed to give gamers an unfair edge. Punch goes scarlet as his eyes burn like coals and fat veins pump at his forehead. Punch. Fucking Joker cranked out aimbots, speed boosters, stat pumpers, you name it. Way to jank up the game, you muggo. Mutter Rachad. Ooh, that one was hard too. Laser shoot from his pupils to scorch a burning, angry face into the news desk. Sage. Well, they'll have a long time to think about it. In jail. Punch displays a huge grin, his face all sharp teeth, voice pitching up 2 octaves into an elfin squeal. Rapey, rapey, jail! Sage. Lawyers for Outlandish Ventures, the makers of Murderworld, had this to say. Press conference. Speaking, James Oberst, lead counselor for OV. Oberst. The game only works if everybody has an equal chance to improve their skills, without players worrying if the other guy's got an unfair advantage. Cheating tarnishes the Outlandish brand and erodes consumer trust, so we take these issues very, very seriously. The company continues to do everything in its power to strongly protect our intellectual property, to further the enjoyment of its players, and to eliminate the public's concerns about game security and integrity. That's why we're demanding that these lawbreakers be tried as adults and serve hard time. Punch's voice goes deep as one of his arms morphs into a nightmarish tentacle that wraps around both Sage and himself. Punch. Jang as fuck, nah. Feel the long, veiny, throbbing arm of the law, my manky, muppety, mew jellies. Wow. The tentacle whips back into place and reverts to an arm. Sage. Exactly why the game's still #1. OV's got our backs. Graphic. The social Darwinist logo, a rattlesnake wrapped in an S shape around a vertical flaming sword, which together form a $sign. Punch. Sage, it was also a fatty fat day in America for my sweet brews, the Social Darwinist Party. They held an intense convention at the Mar Embrium Convention Center in Lunar Game Space, only 2 weeks to Election Day, and they finally picked a presidential candidate. Sage, some say the SDP's initials actually stand for Slow Decision Process. File photo. Richard Danziger, the steely-eyed SD Party presidential candidate. Punch. Democracy takes time, chicky-liggy. That limp dick's centrist Dale Pierce had his ass kicked by man of motherfucking action, Richard Danziger. Sage. Danziger is the former chairman of the Outlandish Board of Directors. Not exactly an experienced politician. Punch. Yeah, fuck those Papa J. Washington insiders. Sage. Seriously? His big idea is a mandatory carry law that would require every adult citizen to pack a loaded gun. A wide cowboy hat appears on Punch's head, and 6 shooters pop into his hands, which he fires into the air. Dead animals fall from above, a duck, a bat, a flying monkey, a plump dragon, all followed by a stealth bomber that crashes and explodes behind him. Punch. Yeehaw! Time for gamers to dominate the American political process. Shoot that through your skulls, bangers. Sage. When Danziger advocates carrying swords, that'll really be sugar. Speaking of weapons, the murder rate's up 13% over last week. Nice work, killers. The most happening pops are still with guns. I'm looking at you, chobos. But edged weapons are still hot, as the biggest kill stars accessorize with knives, swords, axes, and projectiles. Learn to cut, rice throwers, cause that's where the bonus points are. Punch, dressed as a sushi chef, yanks an adorable dolphin onto his desk from off-screen. With expert speed, he uses kitchen cleavers to dice it into sushi rolls, which squeal and wriggle. Then he gobbles them up and chews with vigor as he continues with his mouthful. Punch. Chop, 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 jaggy monkeys. Speaking of slice and dice, time to flash today's sugar pop. A righteous example of sword technique with a weapon you just don't see too often. Scottish claymore. Bloodlusters, suck down this juicy beheading. Punch scissors off his own head with both cleavers, and it floats above his neck on a geyser of blood, grinning. Chapter 3. Thule was considered by most to be a hardship posting. Its technicians often spent their free time in Loka to socialize, play, and experience vistas other than bare tundra, murky ocean, or sheets of ice. Nature here was dramatic, but it was also unforgiving. Going outside into the bleak but beautiful landscape with its sub-zero temperatures was often not an option. Bernhard Holznech worked at the very heart of the massive Thurl server complex housed on a former American Air Force base at the northwestern end of Greenland. The reasons for its remote location were several. The region's low temperatures meant that the facility powered much less energy to keep its gigantic servers cool. The area had convenient access to cheap and plentiful geothermal power, and it was much easier to secure such an isolated spot. Bernhardt's job often involved staring at drifting fields of geometric shapes called nodes, each colorful dimensional form that snapped together with many others like it, often in matrices of millions. At a distance, some node agglomerations looked like representations of molecules, asymmetric blobs composed of chains of color-coded atoms. Some displayed sculptural or architectural features and suggested modernist mobiles, towering helixes or glittering rococo palaces. Others sprouted like plants or fungi, wild fractal growths that splayed like tendrils in every direction. These dense massive patterns represented control functions so ornate they would make a theoretical physicist weep at their complexity. Yet to Bernhard, they made sense. He didn't write them, nobody did, as these were elaborate, evolved algorithms cultivated by specialized programs, but he could read them. The skill for parsing the higher language machines made him a valuable asset, but it also doomed him to a life in which long stretches were spent away from other people. Only other technicians had any hope of understanding what his job entailed, and even most of them couldn't see what he apprehended in the churning morass of interrelated processes that was a node map. If a map was like a symphony to Bach, then Bernhard was a music theorist who could understand, interpret, and appreciate the music's depths, but was himself unable to compose anything quite so intricate. Bernhard's job was Machinist 1, the highest grade within the technical hierarchy, which made him part of a small elite group who were revered as supreme mystics by those below them. He had a master's degree in computer science with a PhD in evolutionary heuristics, which was a terrible thing to try to explain at cocktail parties. Not that he attended many. He loved his work. Though Outlandish was a game company, it was the game company, and it had built the largest, most powerful computer network known to human history. The reality engines that ran the game were required to model the physics and behavior of every possible object in its world, a sphere that was larger than Earth itself, with ornate terrain that used clever mathematics to cram more space into a smaller area, yet which could also forever expand. While the system didn't have to compute the simultaneous existence of everything at once, it did indeed need to process the large parts of it used and enjoyed by billions of players at any given moment, a substantial chunk of turf. Most game physics were Newtonian, although a few of its fancier items, such as Camucho blades, boosted subtle quantum effects that utilized additional calculations. Such items were expensive, and processing requirements were one of the factors that determined their value. Any anomalies, irregularities, or old-fashioned bugs in the game were filtered through a long QC chain. The procedure often began with users whose complaint pattern were tracked by customer support nodes. Voluminous notes were also generated by beta testers who tried to break new features, items, or areas. Fixing a bug was often as simple as changing a single program parameter, something that could be done by the lowest level technician. If players in a certain dojang had gained the power to fly, then perhaps its gravity settings were wrong. If a particular player was unkillable, perhaps bulletproof or sword-resistant beyond what one would expect from armor, then their account was flagged, and once bugs were ruled out, they'd be investigated for cheating. At the next level of error investigation were more complicated problems that required tweaks to the subtle properties of the game itself, such as physics variables or character generation settings, or even required tinkering with the billions of render algorithms that created and dimensionalized Murderworld. These kinds of repairs were done to individual nodes, each of which performed a specific function. This small green node here generated eye color in its iris patterns. This pulsary navy blue node generated dust and controlled the behavior of its particulate effects throughout differing types of terrain and conditions. This fat mottled orange node managed the exquisite dynamic diffusion of splattered blood. Reprogramming a single node was arduous, given that their functions had been evolved through uncountable generations of programs that built other programs. These god machines spawned galaxies of offspring, vast schools likened to seeds or sperm, each of which contained a random string of code. The test that each baby node faced was simple: take an incremental, infinitesimal step toward solving a specific problem. This new batch of children, for example, might be tasked with color recognition, and their first trial would be to differentiate light from dark. Since their internal structure was random, half of them, not capable of anything at all, would straightaway fail the test and be exterminated. Of the remaining trillions, perhaps half of these might have some latent, minuscule tendency towards an unrelated task, like counting or wave modulation, or chirping like a cricket under the green moonlight. Since such skills were not pertinent to the task at hand, the parent system, without mercy, would wipe them out. Only the remaining small percentage, mere lines of code generated as if pecked out by infinite monkeys at infinite typewriters, were in actual complete competition. Since the odds of a random string of information approaching the design of a completed program were at best remote, most of these remaining hatchlings were swept back into the electronic ether by a callous hand. It was as if they'd been hordes of flippered mutants asked to climb a tree. They might have been ahead of the stillborn or those born without flippers, but they were still useless for the task at hand. After several periods of brutal winnowing, a process that in an eye blink culled an initial number greater than all of the grains of sand on Mars down to, say, 8. These remaining few larvae were miraculous in that they could evince a preference. It was only a slight preference, to be sure, and one which was tested ad nauseum in the obsessive-compulsive way that computers approached everything. In human terms, it was as if a parent were to alternate feeding its baby strained carrots, here representing light, and pea puree, representing darkness, from now until the end of time. Whichever spoonful the baby sped up somewhat less often was its favorite. These kids were the winners, and their reward was that not only did they get to live, but also their code would be used as a basis for the next generation of spawn, which instead of being built of random lines of gibberish, would inherit versions of the code, modified with slight mutations, from one of these remaining babies. Now the process of elimination began all over again. Although the few survivors of the second generation would be somewhat better at their assigned task, Natural Selection's Death March/Beauty Contest was an unparalleled process for creating machinery to perform complex tasks, and was thus harnessed to the job of building and operating an artificial world in the same way it had brought about the real one. Because function nodes were evolved, it also meant that they were prone to creating unexpected effects, both alone and in conjunction with other nodes. Nodes held vast swaths of redundant code, which made them hardy and resistant to error, but this additional information, similar to the less understood segments of a DNA strand, also often held latent tendencies, which might not even manifest unless in the presence of other specific nodes or their output, an effect that some scientists compared to the epigenetic switches in human DNA that activated only under certain conditions. While over time it had become impossible to ferret out specific, recurring, undesired consequences of certain node combinations, it wasn't possible to predict novel behavior, as the number of potential code expressions was infinite. If a specific problem emanated from an individual node, then it could often be debugged, a copy of its code teased apart with care and tested within a sealed programming environment at no harm to the still running game, which was never for any reason taken offline. Then there were the bugs that Bernhard saw. I think it's actually Bernard. Yeah, Bernard saw, though bug was not a term that he ever used. The issue that reached him, a technician of last resort, were the kind that generated both awe and fear within lesser minds, problems more like existential crises than programming errors. Billions of nodes spoke to each other in the grand conversation that was the game. These interactions, thousands of trillions per second, produced unpredictable outcomes, digital specters that haunted its users and operators. These artifacts could be small, an intermittent tick that appeared within the game for no discernible reason, such as powder blue butterflies descending to lap up blood from freshly slaughtered players, or the consequences could be large, like a systematic mental illness that hit regions of the game, render seizures that manifested as sudden rainstorms of bile and kidney stones, plagues of hairy alligators wandering the streets, or a sudden lack of right angles in the architecture of a particular dojang. Bernard thought of the game as a giant brain, and supposed that these weird anomalies were its dreams, nightmares, or subconscious processes made palpable within its manufactured territories. And just in the way the dreams were generated in the human brain, nodes worked in concert to create effects analogous to sense memory, or they could conjure abstract symbolic explorations of what might be thought of as the game system's hopes and fears. Bernard thought of his function as that of a psychologist who kept his patient as happy and as free of neurosis as possible. It was an ambiguous business because while it could not be proved with total certainty that the game was a true artificial intelligence, neither could it be proved that it wasn't. Bernard knew that the system was alive in some fashion, but had little interest in sharing this feeling with colleagues. Everybody, including the game, had a job to do, and upper management, even artist Claudius Odes himself, had shown little interest in philosophical conundrums. Outlandish, at foremost, was an entertainment company. Looks like it's a scene break. Even with Bernard's vast experience probing the idiosyncratic symptoms generated by the game's twitchy ubermind, he was still taken aback by the surprising behavior exhibited by a secret project operated under the auspices of an elite division within the company. 2 years ago, OV had expanded the Thule facility's server farm in order to give certain sequestered research its own dedicated resources. The scope of this new wing was breathtaking, and from what Bernard could piece together from various rumors and bits of evidence, the project featured processing capacity greater and faster than the monstrous supercomputers used by the game's own servers. Although this project had the compartmentalized use of its own massive engines, for several months Bernard had tracked a huge spillover of its workload into the main servers. Whatever its function, it sucked up huge swaths of the entire system's processing power, an amount which, if measured in dollars, equaled a staggering sum. Though this was a resource allocation problem to which he shouldn't have to pay attention, the bleed created render anomalies which even he couldn't explain. Kind which would generate oak trees that were bare save for one humongous branch bending leaf that jutted from its tip like a sail, or caused brick structures to sprout a layer of oily feathers. It didn't make sense, as render errors should, in theory, have nothing to do with system resources. But much of the way the system worked did not follow rational pathways. Often the game's architecture utilized what Bernard thought of as hallucinatory logic, and which metaphor trumped reason. Bernard examined some of the secret project's data stream in minute detail, the parts that were decrypted and pushed into the game itself, and discovered that they read just like the standard information generated and received from any player. It looked, in fact, like the mysterious machine was playing the game, or at least existing within M-World. This feed flowed right into the central game server, prioritized with the highest, fastest access, as only Ode's personal data was. Over many obsessive hours, Bernard backtraced the elaborate route this data traveled and followed it back to its source. His patience was rewarded when he uncovered something he'd never seen before, an unusual structure hidden with craft and care in the very heart of the game system. It was, in effect, a black box, a collection of nodes stitched into the server's corpus like a transplanted organ from an alien body. Its data was encrypted and locked down with the strictest access protocols. This lump appeared in his diagnostic view like a mechanical tumor, a silver-black clump of nodes that swarmed with ferocious security hacrophages that prevented tampering. But since the malevolent growth was buried within internal architecture, it meant that the only people who would encounter it would be other machinists. Therefore, it seemed to have, as far as Bernard could tell, a single function: to encrypt the project's data stream from the prying eyes of other outlandish employees. Bernard experienced simultaneous feelings of offense, fascination, and admiration. The tumor was high-level programming, the kind only a few people in the world could manage. After giving it a good long stare, he complained about the resource spillover to the head of his department, a British techie-turned-manager named Lucy Pease. He omitted mention of the occulted, ugly node mass. After looking at the issue, she told him that there was little they could do. "Looks like we've got to suck it up," she told him. "It's one of the boss's pet projects. As long as he knows that we can't take responsibility when it affects game performance, which it already has." "Okay, then let's write it up with specific measurements of the scope of the resource wastage, but we'll frame it in terms of economic impact. That'll make him listen." The report worked, though not in the way they'd expected. Bernard had imagined the upper management might prevent the project from interfacing with the main system. Instead, the company flew in a large work crew to erect a brand new expansion atop the permafrost, doubling the size and in likelihood the server capacity of the project's existing building. Bernard couldn't believe it. The game's own resources had undergone gradual growth over many years, always with great attention paid to cost versus profit, and here Odes was dumping cash into some massive speculative venture, and apparently without financial constraints. But Odes was a business genius, and Bernard had to concede that the man doubtless knew what he was doing. In any case, the noted plutocrat's financial reserves seemed endless. An old joke was that Odes was going to figure out how to simulate the entire world, then charge humanity to live in it. The punchline was that he already had. Bernard was dying to get a look at the hidden equipment, to sneak a peek at its function and design. The operation was run by a tiny team of 3 machinist ones, 2 of whom with which Bernard had made casual acquaintance, since so few employees had such a title. He understood they wouldn't and couldn't talk about their work to anybody. A few times Bernard had walked through the long halls of the Thule complex to stand at the sealed entrance to the wing where the servers were kept, and he'd peered at the massive door. It had a complex biometric seal keyed to facial recognition, voice print, and breath exhalation samples, which were cross-referenced with one's mitochondrial DNA and major histocompatibility complex protein tissue type markers, and he wondered what the hell was going on behind it. 4. Perry exited his office on his way to a morning meeting with his boss, Craig Harrow. He paused at the office door next to his own and peered inside. The space had been empty for weeks since the departure of Carl Stang, an entertainment attorney who'd lasted less than a week. The office was twice as big as Perry's, with a panoramic overview of the bay that centered on Treasure Island. Perry longed for the space and planned to ask Harrow for it as soon as the right opportunity presented itself, but Harrow was notorious for his fickle, even perverse decisions, which was why Stang no longer worked at the firm. Haru had reacted with such imperious ire to Stang's choice of neckwear that he'd fired the man on the spot. Haru's claim was that he could tell whether a person would be a successful lawyer by their clothing, which in this man's case was the tie he'd chosen to wear. While grabbing coffee at a local cafe the same afternoon, Stang was dismissed. Perry had overheard Haru in conversation with another partner, the stoic gray-haired Gabriel Drury. "You know what I mean, Gabe. Ha ha ha," said Haru. "No self-respecting attorney could stand in front of a judge or in a corporate boardroom, ha ha, wearing that kind of sad-ass strip of cloth." "One must dress for success," said Drury in a dry monotone. "Come on, a tie? It's like a guy's cock, for fuck's sake. Ha 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 ha. Symbols influence people's minds. It's at the heart of our business. What kind of message are you sending to the world with some flimsy, floppy, unfashionable rag? Not a good one. I'm telling you, man, it wasn't even silk. Ha 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 ha." Haru's grating habit of punctuating his conversation with inappropriate laughter had earned him the behind-closed-doors nickname of the hyena. Worse, the laugh was accompanied by an ever-present grin. Watching Haru eat was a ghoulish experience because he chewed while smiling, never sealing his lips over his bleached, oversized, glinting teeth, masticating like some diabolic puppet. Perry stepped up to the desk of Haru's hawk-like executive assistant, Mallory Warren. In perfect contrast to Haru, she never smiled. "Hey, Mallory, here to see Greg." "Sit," she commanded, and Perry did, taking a chair in the waiting area across from her desk. Perry noticed that another man occupied a seat nearby. This fellow was skinny, young, and wore a fashionable, expensive suit punctuated by an exquisite blood-red silk tie that was certain not to get him fired. He had gunmetal eyes that contrasted with bronze skin, and spiky, gel-supported raven-colored hair, which combined with the firm set of his jaw gave him a feral mien. The only thing that marred his appearance was the presence of a few fresh pimples to one side of his mouth. To Perry's eyes, he looked somewhat familiar. The man stared into space with a paradoxical, vacant, yet focused look of somebody who viewed an ODD, an ocular data device. Interactive contact lenses. They weren't cheap. Perry had not even warmed his seat before Warren called his name. "And you too, Mr. Rusk. He wants to see both of you." Perry again looked to the other man, wondering who the hell he was and why they were both meeting with Haru. Rusk refocused his gaze on Warren, stood, adjusted his elegant tie, and smiled at her. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with a kind of sincerity unfamiliar in the legal profession. Warren nodded back, which was more than she'd ever given Perry. Perry entered the office, Rusk right behind him. Warren nodded back, which was more than... Oh, wait. I totally missed a paragraph. Okay, Haru stood at his desk, a plastic water bottle in one hand. "Guys, come in, sit." Haru indicated a long sofa by the huge picture window that ran along the two outside walls of his corner office. In the distance, the Golden Gate Bridge glowed flame red in the kind of relentless midday sun that defined weather across the entire state of California. After decades of continuous drought, the Big Burn, much of the region had reverted to desert. Heat and water deprivation had led to dust bowl conditions that had devastated the state's treasured Central Valley agricultural areas and baked them into lifelessness. Scorching coastal heat of a kind that had never before existed dominated local weather patterns, and almost every day one could experience a breathtaking sunset thanks to wind-blown particulate from the valley's dead fields. San Francisco fog was getting rare, yet the breezy coast was still more tolerable than the hot, desiccated interior. Throughout the state, the air had the same dense, hazy quality, and distant objects looked to be swathed in cotton, an effect caused both by air at topsoil and the constant flow of ash from any number of concurrent forest fires. The state's remaining agriculture, concentrated in the northern third of the valley, was now dependent upon industrial-scale desalination plants that dotted the coastline, an infrastructure that had once pumped water from interior to coast, or from north to south, now ran in reverse. The southern portion of the valley, under permanent sunlight, was devoted in large part to solar farms. Haru stood across from the other man and rested his forearms on the back of a big leather chair as he showed off his teeth. "Perry, I know you've been working on the Playmania suit for a while, but this case is a big deal. Ha! The biggest. Damages sought by the plaintiffs are ridiculous. Class action shit's out of hand. I mean, $20 billion? You could run a South American republic off that amount, am I right?" "I agree," said Perry, "which is why discussing a settlement is essential too." Haru's eyes flashed above his smile, a moment of rage. "Did you just say the S word? Shit, Perry! When you find cockroaches in the cookie jar, you don't give them the keys to the pantry." Perry swallowed, nodded. "Listen, we need a new angle, a fresh set of eyes, because we gotta take this thing to the mat so it doesn't set a precedent. The entire gaming industry is behind us. The market is watching because the outcome of this case impacts one of the major engines of our economy. Negotiation is not an option. We need to crush these eaters of shit. Rusk, you know the situation, right? Pretty well, Rusk beamed. Perry noted that he blinked twice, which would activate the ODD. Perry was positive he was reading from the device's screen. Playmania is being sued by a group of plaintiffs who claimed the company created games designed to deliberately addict its players. Playmania filed a motion to dismiss on the grounds that addiction cannot be measured in a form by which damages can be calculated. During discovery, plaintiffs produced evidence, doubtless illegally obtained, that Playmania backed behaviorist research into augmenting standard game reward models with both overt and subliminal sensory signals that, in effect, utilize both classical and operant conditioning to program the brains of users into... Yeah, you got it, Haro broke in. More to the point, do you know the financials behind the company? Rusk looked at Haro. As far as I know, Playmania is a standard publicly traded firm. Haro grinned wider. Their majority stockholder is an investment group called Kroger and Barks, but K&B is just a front for Outlandish. The reason our firm is on the case and not the Outlandish legal team is because they want to maintain a firewall between themselves and Playmania in case things go south. Damn, said Rusk. Fucking A right. It also means that the future of our firm is riding on this case, because it's common knowledge within the gaming industry that Outlandish pulls the strings. Haro leaned in. So here's the deal. We're not going to argue with the evidence. Instead, we're disputing the plaintiff's conclusions. They claim that game addiction is inherently damaging, but we're going to prove that the addictiveness of games is what gives them value in a competitive marketplace. All good games are addictive, back to fucking Donkey Kong. If they aren't, they fail. So creating a non-addicting game is just a blueprint for corporate bankruptcy. Brilliant, said Rusk, managing to sound like he wasn't kissing Haro's ass. I like to think so, since it's my strategy. Ha ha ha. Haro stood straight, indicating Perry. Dunn here has been cobbling together our arguments as well as relevant precedent, but what I need is an insider's perspective on the methods and function of game design, and specific as they relate to the economics of the business. That's why I brought you in, Rusk. Perry felt his stomach clench. But Greg, don't you want to first read my current research? Haro waved a hand with a dismissive flap. I'm just looking for us to add anything you might have missed. Drexel here is a gamer. He's even occasionally cracked the top 500, and he's a newly minted lawyer as well. Haha, just graduated. Perry now realized that there was a good chance he'd seen or heard about Rusk on one of the many game programs that streamed 24 hours a day. Rusk was the real deal, a professional player. He couldn't have been older than 22, and he made Perry, who was 35, feel a sudden twinge of irrelevance. This is a great opportunity for you too, Perry. Haro grinned wider. Drex here can help you with your game, ha ha ha. You should really up your stats, because DHS is actively trying to represent more game companies. Those guys fucking love it when they see gamers on their legal team, especially great ones. Perry's smile expressed itself as the grimace of a doctor delivering news of cancer while trying to remain positive. I'm working hard on it. People want a killer for a lawyer, a gut-ripping predator. Haro stepped forward to slap Rusk on the back. And now we got one. Ha! Rusk beamed. Glad to be part of the team. Perry's mouth went dry. At that moment, he had no words, and what good, he realized, was a lawyer who couldn't even defend himself. 5. Chun Shu-yun had stayed up later than she'd intended and was sleepy on the bus that morning. She didn't notice when the driverless vehicle left her neighborhood, the Chang Five Dong in the Dobong-gu district, and crossed the low bridge over the Jungnang-chan River and into the Sangia Six Dong and the Nowon-gu district. Many in her own neighborhood, who believed the west of the river to be superior to the east, thought of this area as squalid and dodgy. It was packed with jokbang, rowdy rooming houses with individual units that were a hand's breadth bigger than a bed, and was also home to their slightly upscale cousins, Goshiwon. Tiny furnished studio apartments. The ramshackle buildings that housed these units were sandwiched between tall, crumbling concrete apartment blocks that decades ago were once desirable places to live, but were now brimming with immigrant families, whom Koreans still often treated like lepers. The area was known to be a haven for local Kyungpai mafias who had reinforced their numbers with northerners, driven by poverty to do anything for money. On occasion, the police would haul a tattooed body, or just its parts, out of the Jungnang-chan, or one of its canals, before these corpses floated downstream and into the wide Han River that snaked through the heart of Seoul like its pulmonary artery. Many of the sector's immigrants had poured over the border in an unending stream starting 10 years before, when the North Korean government had ceased to exist. Decades of brutal drought had led to unavoidable famine, which initiated events that nobody from the North wanted to discuss. though all signs pointed to societal collapse and state-sponsored massacres, and rumors of mass cannibalism were accepted by most as fact. The end result was a united Korea, but one scarred by both the North's recent history and more than a century of mutual antagonism between former enemies. The country's de facto capital was Seoul, while the old showpiece metropolis of the former Democratic People's Republic, Pyongyang, was now a dilapidated wasteland squatted by the poorest of the poor. Now 12 years old, So-yoon had been in middle school for almost 2 months, and she soon noticed that many northern students also attended. In her class alone, almost half the children had parents who had escaped from an unimaginable monstrous hellscape, and these damaged adults had passed much of their trauma onto their children like an unwanted inheritance. It made many northern kids aggressive or anxious, their fight-or-flight mechanisms activated by hair-trigger stimuli. So-yoon was dozing in her seat when she felt the rude, forceful jab of her long trombone case being shoved into her side. She snapped open her eyes to see a stocky northern girl named Kim Bong-cha glaring at her. "Give me some room." Startled, So-yoon pulled her case into her lap and scooted as far into the corner by the window as she could go. Bong-cha threw her overstuffed backpack onto the seat between them, then plopped herself down upon the bench to further mash So-yoon against the wall. Bong-cha sneered at her. "Didn't your mama teach you how to share?" So-yoon didn't answer and stared out the window in silence. Other kids had noticed the conflict and now looked on with interest. Any event that spiced up the dull routine of school was welcome, and their eyes glinted with anticipation of a fight. "I'm talking to you, Shrimp," said Bong-cha, leaning toward So-yoon. "Gonna be a long bus ride if you don't listen to me." "Leave me alone," said So-yoon, tired. "Shit, you Southerners are such wimps." Bong-cha's face was scrunched into a mask of hate. "You got it so easy, never had to work hard for anything. Toughen up." She punched So-yoon in the arm. "Ow, cut it out." Bong-cha punched her again. "Make me, baby." So-yoon held up her hands in futile effort to stop the next blow, but Bong-cha punched her leg instead. "Smash your face, Bong-cha," urged the northern boy. Southern girl, one seat over, looked toward. "Come on, So-yoon, get her." Around then, the other kids began to shout at each other, whipped into a frenzy by old conflict, each taking sides based on their place of birth. "Northerners are stupid," barked one kid. "Southerners are shit," screamed another. Many took shots at their neighbors, shoving them, kicking them, whacking them with their backpacks, or using their fists. The bus purred through city traffic as a few astonished drivers watched the chaos through their windows. Bong-cha continued thumping her victim in rhythmic, determined fashion, as So-yoon curled into a fetal ball around her trombone case and remained that way all the way to school. 6. Perry took Linda to her favorite restaurant, Heart of Sharkness Sushi on California, near Taylor. She loved fish, and the sushi place was only served ethically vetted, sustainable seafood. Certain delicacies, like sea urchin, were cultivated by tiny local collectives that operated off of the northern coast of the state. Other varieties were produced by corporations that had built massive offshore deepwater pens, circled by thousands of miles of carbon nanofiber netting, where they could raise protected, isolated stocks of bluefin and yellowtail. Trolling for wild catch was illegal in many parts of the world, but that didn't stop people from doing it. "Do you want some sake?" Linda tilted her head as she examined the beverage list. "As long as it's Japanese. That synthetic domestic stuff is awful." Perry shrugged. "Rice is expensive." The waiter took their order, and moments later brought the sake, a room-temperature junmai dajingjo, with a flavor that invoked wildflower, honey, mushrooms, and wood. Perry had the impression he was sipping pricey perfume. "That SoCal typhoon last week was a big one," said Linda. "I told you about my Uncle Dave's fleet of tour boats in San Diego, right? So one of them sank and some of the others were damaged. Hope he was insured. Of course, I don't even remember West Coast typhoons happening when I was a kid." Perry slurped his drink. "It's the rising ocean temperature, higher humidity. It expanded their range." "Think we'll ever get them in San Francisco?" "It's possible, but I doubt our seawalls are up to the task. I thought they made them stronger after the '69 tsunami. The guy I know in the city planning department tells me they're window dressing. They look thick, but the engineering is substandard. If we get waves higher than 20 feet, the Embarcaderio's gonna wash away." Probably said that wrong. "How reassuring." The food arrived. Linda grabbed a roll of unagi maki, dabbled it in her shallow dish of soy sauce and wasabi, shoved the bite into her mouth, grinning. "Damn, that's good," she said. A drop of soy sauce remained at the corner of her mouth, which for Perry made her look even cuter, as if she were a messy child, a picture enhanced by her pixie-cut, chestnut-colored hair. Perry tried to savor every bite of a meal that cost him a quarter of a week's salary. It was, he reminded himself, a special occasion. After they'd eaten, they ordered dessert, a simple yet delectable Ichigo Daifuku. A fat GMO strawberry with purple seeds, covered with a translucent layer of chewy mochi rice dough reminiscent of pale human skin. They dismantled it with tiny forks upon which they speared small bites. Perry pulled a velour box from his pants pocket and hid it in his lap. He cleared his throat, and under the table, brushed the container's furred fabric with his thumb. "Linda," he began, "I think we have a lot to offer each other." Excuse me. "I hope so. It's been almost 2 years. Yeah, true. November, right?" "Right," he nodded. "So I was hoping we might take things a little further." He set the box on the table next to the empty dessert plate. Linda stared at the object, an alien artifact polluting the purity of the uncluttered table. "What's that?" "Open it." Linda didn't touch the box. "Perry, I don't know what you think you're doing, but we haven't talked about this. Please, just open it, then we can talk." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. Her face was caught somewhere between surprise and a frown. "This is the thing," she began. "I make a decent living, and so do you. But it's not enough. I told you my raise is overdue. It's going to happen soon. I hope so, because right now neither of us has much room. What happens if we have a kid?" "Well, and what about entertaining guests? I don't want to move into a slightly larger shoebox. We need space. And in this town, we can't afford it yet." Perry stared at the table. "I'm not being materialistic. I'm being realistic." She pushed the box back towards him. "Sweetie, you get that raise, and then I'll open it. You said yourself it won't be long." Perry put the box back into his pocket. 7. Bernard ate a late dinner in the lower employee lounge, a cozy windowless space filled with comfortable furniture, tables, and a few public consoles. The space looked like a large living room attached to a kitchen. Along the back wall was a floor-to-ceiling panel that, at the moment, displayed a scene of arboreal bliss, a redwood forest carpeted with ferns, the bark of fallen trees tufted with coats of moss, beams of slanting sunlight cut through its shadows and swirled with plumes of mist. As was often the case, Bernard found himself alone. Employees of the facility often kept disparate sleep-wake cycles. Some had of necessity synchronized their schedules to the business hours of different parts of the globe, while engineers like Bernard often worked at odd times. Plus, the lack of windows in much of the complex made it easy to forget the current hour. An upper lounge provided a breathtaking view of Wolstenholme Ford and the flat expanse of Saunders Island across the water of North Star Bay, where occasional icebergs drifted past in its waters, the few remaining chunks of Greenland's vanished glaciers. A few hungry polar bears still stalked the nearby Pacific Plain, but were kept at bay by an electrified fence. The northern air was so clear that objects looked much closer than they were, and with ordinary binoculars one could even examine abandoned Narcersuk 7 miles along the coast to the southwest. The town was still contaminated with plutonium long after the 1968 crash of a B-52 bomber bearing 4 hydrogen bombs. Its payload had ruptured on impact, detonating the weapon's conventional explosives, which had spread their nuclear core material over the surrounding area. The long Arctic winter had already begun to swallow the sky into its lightness maw, and there would soon be little difference between the two lounges in terms of view. The lower lounge's ceiling lights bathed the room with the proper wavelengths to both stave off seasonal affective disorder and to produce vitamin D, but Bernard had long ago found the lighting control panel and dimmed them whenever he had the place to himself. Low lighting helped him concentrate. In one corner, a treader, a robotic laborer, swept the floor using a spinning brush to whisk dirt and crumbs into a floor-level slot in its body. Treaders moved all over the base, inside and out, as their tank-like wheels adapted to any terrain, and they performed custodial chores or delivered materials around the station. As tall as an adolescent child, between 4 and 5 feet, they also had grasping hands that could lift and hold, but lacked the fine motor controls needed to manipulate tiny objects. They weren't too smart, but could be programmed or given basic verbal instructions. Bernard heard a new noise behind him, and glanced over to see that a slim figure had popped open one of the kitchen's snack coolers and now rifled its contents for something to eat. The person shut the cooler door and turned around, and Bernard saw that it was Lisa Pekinen, one of the machinists assigned to the secret project. She pushed ropes of her straight, dark, shoulder-length hair behind one ear and pulled the lid from a small cup of ice cream. As she dug a plastic spoon into the container, she glanced up and saw that Bernard watched. "Hi, Bernard," she said, as her face lit up with a self-conscious smile. "Didn't see you when I came in." Like Bernard, she spoke English with a slight accent. She was Finnish, he was Austrian. "I chew quietly," he replied. "Want me to turn the lights back up?" "No, this is nice. Those lamps are really bright. Makes me think I should wear sunglasses in here." "Exactly. Can't think. Have a seat." She plopped down into a plump maroon sofa across from Bernard. I'm having ice cream for dinner again. Shouldn't, but it's been a craving lately. Don't know why. It's this environment, said Bernard as he waved a finger at the room. Disassociates you from your senses. In contrast, we spend much of our time inside the loca where certain faculties are overloaded, especially visual and auditory. A friend of mine wrote a paper about it. He said the result is that you crave stronger input from the senses that are underused, like smell and taste. Makes sense, or senses. She examined the ice cream with a frown, and then set the container on a low table between them. Now that I know why I want it, I don't want it anymore. Contrarian, asked Bernard. Psychologist, she said, grinning. I reject anything that smacks of behavioral reinforcement. I read Skinner in college and immediately hated him. You think too much. Another job hazard, maybe? She raised an eyebrow at him. We could do something about that. What? Kill some brain cells. Scene break. Bernard wasn't a big drinker, but when she'd said she had a bottle back in her room, he was intrigued. The facility didn't provide alcohol to the employees, so liquor was a kind of contraband. The beverage in question was salmiakki, a traditional Finnish concoction, vodka infused with intense black licorice flavored with salty ammonium chloride. Looking into a small glass, Bernard saw a murky, inky syrup that looked similar to used motor oil. Lisa watched him with an intense, almost scientific interest as he downed it in one gulp. This first shot was the worst. It went down hard, his body reacting to it like it was poison. He had to fight not to retch. It was without doubt the most vile liquid that had ever passed his lips. I'm impressed, said Lisa. You didn't spit it out. Stubborn, Bernard grimaced. The flavor contaminated his mouth and refused to abate. More? She poured him another. It's masochism, said Bernard, raising his glass. In a short time they went through half the bottle, then began to pull off each other's clothing. Lisa tasted like salmiakki, briny sweet. As she rode on top of him, her thick hair swung in rhythmic counterpoint. Strands of black licorice. Scene break. Later, as he lay on Lisa's bed and stared at her ceiling, Bernard wondered to himself why it had taken him so long to find a Thule hookup. Random sexual encounters were so frequent that the place had acquired a well-deserved reputation among techies, who'd given it racy nicknames like Ice Station Beaver, or made bad puns on the station's name, which the Americans who'd built it had not quite correctly pronounced as Tool. There was nothing special about the base other than the simple fact that the people there, when not working, were often bored out of their minds. Although the Loca could provide an almost unlimited breadth of experience, its limitations meant that its delights and depravities often lacked a certain depth. Bernard mulled over the other, less documented cravings caused by sensory disassociation, and decided he might shoot his old friend a note to provide some anecdotal evidence. 8. Perry paced the beach in small circles as he talked to his mother, who lounged in an orange bikini on a fluffy white towel, propped up on her elbows as she regarded him through huge sunglasses. Their location was a gorgeous simulation of Pink Sands Beach on the eastern shore of Harbor Island in the Bahamas at about 4 p.m., one of the rotating cycle of beaches he'd programmed into her console. The sun shone right behind them, obscured by a gauzy veil of clouds that turned the sky a washed-out shade of lavender that harmonized with the rosy sand and the clear blue ocean. The scene's color contrast had been boosted until it looked like a living postcard. Maddie Doone was still hot, even at 57. It didn't stop her from tweaking every aspect of her appearance within the Loca. Perry had long been grateful she hadn't yet chosen to augment her breasts to the extent she'd done to her in-game persona. Don't be such a loser. Mom, Jesus, how about a little support? I've always said you were fucking smart, but you're just like one of those badly designed characters who have all their points in one attribute. Thanks. Really? That's why Linda rejected you, and why you haven't gotten your raise, and why you're still a truly shitty gamer. Couldn't you just, I don't know, maybe once in a while just give me a cookie and glass of milk and tell me everything's going to be alright? Then you'd just be an even bigger pussy. Perry stared at her, arms crossed. I see now that I really blew it when I neglected to have years of expensive therapy. She lay back on the towel and adjusted her sunglasses. A good therapist would tell you the truth, exactly like I always do. No, you simply knocked me down because I'm an easy target. Perry picked up a baby conch shell from the sand and flung it into the waves. She rolled on her side to face him. Then stop being one. Perry turned his back to her, silent. Maddie stood, walked to him, put a hand on his shoulder. He shrugged it off. If somebody tries to shoot you, what do? Must you always use game metaphors? You could wear a flak vest, but that requires planning. Or you could dodge the bullet, but that takes extreme skill. But those are passive, weak solutions. The best option? Kill the motherfucker first. Be proactive. Force the enemy to defend, because while defending they can't attack. Even better, don't wait until you're in battle. Know in advance they're planning to kill you and destroy them first. That's basic Sun Tzu. Always choose the circumstances for combat. Fight on your terms. Perry turned, shook his head. Thanks, Mom. I'll remember that the next time I plan on laying siege to my girlfriend's apartment. He signed off, vanishing from the beach. Scene break. He yanked off the interface, then stood and looked out the window. What his apartment lacked in size it made up for in view, as he had a startling panorama of the Bay Bridge. In the distance, Oakland's lights sparkled. He hadn't visited that side of the bay in a long time. Leaving the San Francisco Enclosed Economic Zone, often called the Ease, was a pain. The Transbay Tunnel, through which BART subway train once ran, hadn't been repaired since the 2069 quake. Crossing at the Bay Bridge was pricey and required a car, and Perry didn't own one. For the sake of urban density, his building didn't even have a garage. Plus, leaving the city meant entering a suburban free-for-all regulated by a patchwork of laws that made little sense. Out there, the flimsy remnants of federal and state governmental power competed with local fiefdoms. Citizen Soviets operated by idealistic committees, walled-off corporate holdings aggressively patrolled by heavy armed security who shot first and disposed the bodies later. And further out, past the sprawl, existed vast tracts of crumbling infrastructure where a kind of frontier justice prevailed. As he watched incoming fog swallow the bridge, he knew that his mother was, in her own unique way, right. 9. Sun Yoon ran into her room right after dinner and pulled her interface over her head. The scheduled match was about to start, and she'd paid for it in advance with the small amount of money her mother added every month to her account to use for in-game purchases. Not that her mother knew which game she was playing. It wasn't enough cash to buy anything fancy or useful, but it kept her up on important matches. She punched the power stud. Scene break. She winked into a circular arena, the Ludus Maximus. It was packed with tens of thousands of screaming fans, the default view for the spectacle. It was probable that millions more watched than could fit into the space, but they were hidden from her view. For all she knew, the audience members around her were bots anyway, and each real viewer was plunked down into the same seat she now occupied. The stadium duplicated as often as needed on individual consoles. She could, if she wished, watch the battle from any seat in the stadium, or even as a lone spectator on a single chair right in front of the combatants, or she could be an invisible hovering camera that framed the action from any angle. At the moment, she sat only a few rows back from the edge of the field. Ladies and gentlemen, boomed a reverberating male announcer's voice, presenting this week's mighty fight on Friday night, sponsored by Visual Purple, makers of the visionary line of high-performance specs, seeing is believing. The crowd whooped as if they cared about the product, either an automatic reaction or a programmed response. And now, without further delay, introducing our combatants. To the bone-jarring hammer of taiko drums, a giantess appeared to stand on the top edge of the stadium's wall. The challenger, ranked number 7 in the world and a specialist in the dark arts of ninjutsu as a master of the Togokiri Ryu School of the Hidden Door. Her image multiplied across the stadium's outer rim, now a gaggle of giant, identical sisters as tall as office buildings, each of which stood in a different pose that ranged from vicious to seductive. Current wielder of Felix the Sixth Armillion, lethal Nekote, also known as Cat Scratch Fever, I bring you the Tigress of Toledo, Guillotino Tarantella. The cyclopean projections disappeared in sudden bursts of flame, leaving behind a single version of the fighter in the center of the arena. To a throbbing soundtrack, she hacked and slashed at the air in tight kata sequences. On each of her hands, a trio of carbon matrix claws attached to a steel on-leather glove, the Nekote. Her beauty was as stunning as her moves, and her body whipped into fighting poses with supple ferocity. She ended with a flourish, then leaned down towards the audience. Her face loomed over the arena as she spoke with a kittenish growl. My greatest pleasure is to feel the hot blood of my enemies splash against my soft and perfect skin. I'm coming for you. The audience screamed, some for her, some against her, and many oogled her magnified breasts, which hovered above them like twin blimps. She vanished into sudden mist. From out of this fog was revealed a muscular silhouette, huge and imposing, in the middle of the stadium. The audience hushed. Taiko drums again shook the stadium. The champion, ranked number 1 in the world, founder of Budai Jutsu School of Kendo, undefeated for over 26 months, current wielder of Polestar, the First Armillion, the devastating katana also known as the Ice Pick. I give you Eraser X. The shadowed body was slashed by purple lightning from nearby clouds, and he glowed, revealed. Skin-tight navy blue suede covered his body, with sleeves that terminated in gloves. Around his waist was a simple charcoal sash. His skin was olive-tone and featureless, his head clean-shaven. Black rectangles floated before his eyes like narrow sunglasses, obscuring them. He thrust his arm above his head, in his fist the signature translucent blue sword made of a single piece of unbreakable ice. His airy, soothing voice whispered into each viewer's ear, "Only once you have conquered yourself can you defeat your enemy." The stadium rocked with the blast of trumpets underscored by the bass of explosions, and metallic confetti rained from the sky to dance in the air. The crowd went insane, and people jumped up out of their seats. Some pumped their fists, women flashed their breasts, people screeched their undying love. A chill ran across So Yoon's skin, and she shivered with pleasure. The giant vanished in a glittering cloud, and the two ordinary-sized combatants appeared on the arena sand upon a wide, low, elevated mound. So Yoon switched her perspective to a spot a dozen paces away from both fighters, but kept the illusionary stadium around her as she loved the noisy enthusiasm of the crowd. "And now," said the announcer, "it's time to kill." A massive countdown timer floated above the center of the stadium, starting at 5, and each number, the size of a small building, was underscored by a low tone that vibrated So Yoon's bones. At 0, the final enormous number exploded into rubble. The stadium structure flashed as it electrified, and a clap of thunder echoed across the sky. Game on. Guillotino crouched, muscles coiled with lethal purpose. Black and orange striped hair fluffed into a wild mane around a feral face. She began to circle, as did Eraser, who moved like a dancer as his bare feet took light steps across the sand, both hands on the ice pick's hilt, while its tip tracked his enemy. Guillotina struck first, kicked a small cloud of grit at Eraser with her foot before launching herself at his midsection. She punched toward his gut with one set of the triple claws, and held the other over her head, ready to block Eraser's strike. It isn't going to work, predicted So Yoon in the split second before Eraser reacted. She guessed he dodged to the inside of the strike, letting Guillotino's momentum carry her past him before he deflected her parrying hand, lest she turn it into a second strike. He then bounced the deflection into a flank attack. Her observation paid off as Eraser performed almost the exact move she'd guessed, but instead turned the deflection of her other claw into a leg sweep with the Mune. The unsharpened back edge of the sword, a much harder move that required an extra rotation of his weapon. The blade thwacked Guillotina's shin from under her. The fact that he didn't cut her leg out from under her meant he angled for a better attack, played her for a sweeter kill with a higher score. The tigress tumbled into a roll, landed in a squat on both feet with her back to Eraser, who brought his katana down in a blurred arc at her head, threatening to split her in half. Her claws crossed over her crown as they blocked the strike with a piercing metallic ring. She rotated her body into a cartwheel, the blade still locked in her claws. As both of her fists touched the ground, she sprung off of them, away from Eraser and his weapon, and landed in crouch. She shot herself at Eraser, the nekote now the head of a human arrow. Despite the tiny profile she presented, Eraser sliced right between two of the claws, then spun his sword like a propeller to lock the blades, a configuration he used like a lever to hoist the woman over his body and throw her to the ground. Alright guys, that's the end of the sample for tonight. That was Murderworld by Alan White. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Also, I hope you guys have a good day, a good night, good week, good weekend, whatever time it is that you're watching this, and I will see you next time.